This is Jerome Corsi. Today it's Monday. It's December 30th, 2024. 2024 is winding down pretty fast here. We've got today and tomorrow will be New Year's Eve. Thank you for joining us at thetruthcentral.com. We're here every weekday with podcasts. Then you can find me on X at CorsiJerome1, and on Substack it's JeromeCorsiPhD.substack.com. I've been posting on Substack pretty regularly, almost every day now, and we will get X up and going. We may change the nature of the program. I may revive Corsi Nation, which I had for many years, and go back to that as my main broadcast source. Today I want to cover quite a bit on the God's Five Stones. Chris, if you'll go to the website, we're about to produce a report here on Florida. Florida has a lot of clones. We're finding that the president's attorney is now taking a strong interest in the God's Five Stones finding of these algorithms in the state Board of Election databases. This is going to be a continuing story. It's going to be a story because there's going to be court cases filed, and then when the Department of Justice gets reorganized, there's going to be legal cases brought on voter fraud that are going to be very significant. The Democrat voter fraud scheme, I think we've cracked the code, and now we're aiming to break it. So therefore, we're keeping alive godsfivestones.com. We're getting additional contributions to it. So additional donations will focus us. My goal here is to really take the next 2 years and break the back of the Democrats embedding these schemes in the state Board of Election databases where they can falsify records that yet get state ID numbers so that they can be voted. That's the whole scheme here. And we're finding that there are millions and millions of these voters out there on the state databases, and they've not been removed. They're there because it's the way the Democrats want them, and the intelligence agencies, which I think are increasingly running our elections. So we have a lot more to do here, and we're just beginning. Now, Donald Trump's election is pivotal. It is the story of 2024. Donald Trump has come back to be president. He's only the second person. Grover Cleveland was out of office for one term and came back. And that was in the turn of the century. And now we've got Donald Trump returning. Donald Trump has probably won 3 elections. And I think we'll be able to probe deeply into these algorithms to see the extent to which they were used in 2020. We don't know we haven't investigated them as thoroughly, but I'm fairly confident that when we do, we're going to find some very incriminating information. And we're going to have the Justice Department finally, I think, getting off of going after Catholics who believe and want to attend the Latin Mass, or the white supremacists, that we're the evil empire. Okay, this woke has never been less broke. It's now broke completely. Woke is on the run, and DEIE is on the run. And I'll reference Boeing. After its latest crash, Boeing DIE is destroying the company. You cannot have people hired because of their race or their gender or their other BS characteristics that are defined by this critical theory, when in fact they're incompetent, can't do the job. DEI departments are being, I think, eliminated around the world. Next, we got to go after the universities. The universities have far too much money. They are just the universities are promoting this communist agenda. We don't need them. As far as I'm concerned, we can just start, because these endowments are outrageous. The amount of money that's been given by the student tuition program since Obama nationalized the student tuition programs, outrageous. It just permits these universities to hire more and more communists, more and more Marxists, more and more people who hate America. We don't need more generations of Americans taught to hate America. And Donald Trump's victory, I think, was fundamental in a rejection of this entire DEI agenda. I've been writing about this now for years. Christopher, we'll put up the cover of the Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy, that book very clearly laid out, in fact, that this agenda is a destructive agenda. It's satanic. It's aimed at abandoning God, destroying the family. And that book is done extremely well. I think it'll do better over the next few years as people get more attuned to this dark philosophic period we've been through, in which human beings are not being valued. As far as authors like this Noah Harari, World Economic Forum, bright star, human beings mostly are needless. We're worthless. We don't have you cut open a human being, Harari says, you don't see human rights. It's a fiction. There he is. And he's done more damage to say that all of the beliefs that we live in, including God, for Harari, God's just a sky fairy. Well, I hope when Harari gets a chance to meet God, he explains to God he's just a sky fairy as he goes to hell where he belongs for eternity. That's up to God. But I'll tell you, the way he's been writing, the way he's been, and of course he sells 65 million books. There's always an audience out there that hates God, and they buy the books. Okay, so now you've got a whole generation that is intolerant of God, intolerant of traditional values, intolerant of family, intolerant of things that make society livable. Instead, we have criminals running our cities, got Democratic mayors in bankruptcy, got this country has really gone broke under the DEI Democrats. Democrats, I think, are communists. The communists have become a treasonous party. The Democratic Party has become a treasonous party. Okay, so now we're going through the transition. The transition's had just any number of points where it could have failed, and the first of all, Biden sends these long-range missiles, these attack bombs, to Zelenskyy in Ukraine, and they fire them into Russia. Well, that isn't provocative, and Putin says this is going to cause World War III. If you guys continue to attack Russia, I'm going to have no alternative but to escalate this war to a nuclear war. And Putin drops one of these huge bombs, a supersonic bomb that looked like a nuclear explosion. I think it was really one of these new, this kind of energy bombs, which again, I think are revolutionary. I think the technology for these bombs, kinetic bombs, have been developed by Russia that we are not part of developing. Our military is too interested in admirals wearing dresses, putting on lipstick. I think Donald Trump's going to get all of this crap out. The men out of women's sports, the bathrooms not being gender neutral. All this insanity, I think now the American public have finally rejected, especially when gasoline costs over $3 a gallon. And this is ridiculous. The Democrats have done nothing but destroy the middle class, produce a satanic cult, produce any number of ideologically driven scientific pseudoscience. Chris, put up my book also, if you would, please, on the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change. That book is done extremely well. Again, the whole climate hysteria is nothing but an ideological hoax. The world is not heating up intolerably because of hydrocarbon fuels being used. And I think we're realizing worldwide that wind and solar are a dead duck. Hertz and Avis are dumping their Tesla lots at very cheap. EVs don't work. They're a trendy idea. And by the way, this whole pseudo science, this whole pseudo ideology, this anti-God Satanism. I think in some ways, it's almost a blessing that Trump lost in 2020 because we've gotten to see 4 years of Biden and what these people are really about. I'm glad to see it go. And I think Trump will So in the interim period of time here, during the transition, there were days when we could have gone to World War III over Ukraine, and NATO was happy to ramp up the violence. Okay, so moves were made, and I was made. There's one Friday when it was, I thought critical, and we got the word to Donald Trump. Donald Trump, I think, reached out to Putin, and Putin, that Saturday, Putin said he wanted to meet with Donald Trump as soon as possible. The next day, on Sunday, Donald Trump gave his speech at Charlie Kirk's Turning Point a conference and acknowledged that Putin had reached out and said that, in fact, the United States wanted to meet with Putin, and Trump said in that speech that he would meet with Putin as soon as possible after the inauguration, and the war would be settled. So I think Zelenskyy needs to realize that, with all of his cocaine madness and his how many billions of dollars has he stoked away in bank accounts through the corrupt system that is Ukraine, that Zelenskyy better wise up. This game is done. And the CIA wants to maintain Ukraine as open and go to war with Russia so it can maintain its money laundering through the Ukraine, thank you, Biden family. All this corruption, I think, is massive. And we're seeing finally with Donald Trump coming into the presidency. And by the way, then we had to, even in Russia, the generals were ready to revolt against Putin. And we're getting messages immediately to Putin saying, relax, double your security. Same message to Donald Trump, double your security. Get through the transition. As we get through this transition, we can have a situation where we reestablish peace. War in the Middle East can end. The war in Ukraine can end. Now, the terms are not going to be one that Ukraine likes. These two provinces that Russia has gained on these Russian-speaking provinces and Crimea, they're going to stay Russian. They'll become independent states. And the truth is, Poroshenko and then Zelenskyy was sending in neo-Nazi brigades to kill and attack any of the freedom fighters, those who wanted these two provinces to be independent states. And when Zelenskyy started attacking the Russian Orthodox Church, Putin had enough. Putin had made agreements not to invade, and Boris Johnson scrapped those agreements. For some reason, the Democrats, since the fall of the Berlin Wall, when Russia renounced communism, the Democrats decided they hate Russia because the Democrats are communist. It's a communist party we're dealing with. It is a destructive communist party that I think needs to be banned. Now, the predicament of Biden right now is that Biden being implored to give Obama pardons, to give everybody pardons. And the problem with this is that Donald Trump said very clearly that if Biden limits the pardons to his family, it'll be all right. Trump's not interested in going after Biden. Biden is so feeble at this point, and now finally we're getting the truth coming out of the White House that for 4 years he's been mentally incompetent. Lies, lies, lies. That's all the Democratic Party is. That's all the Communist Party is. All the treasonous party is. Lies, lies, lies. And I've had enough of it. I think a lot of Americans have had enough of it. So, in fact, I think there's going to be fundamental changes here. I think you take the entire bureaucracy of the United States government and move it to Death Valley. Give it all the solar, give it Quonset huts to live in, and all the solar and wind they want. And those who want their jobs can move. Those who don't want their jobs can find something else to do. It's the only way to get rid of the civil service. Move the bureaucracy out of Washington and take those buildings and give them over to the vets who are now homeless in the streets. Let's take all those buildings in Washington and make them available for veterans. Let's do something useful with those buildings rather than have all this huge bureaucracy that just makes destructive rules and becomes the business prevention department of the United States government. It's fundamentally time to get through this transition. We've only got 20-some days left. Once we get to January 1, it'll be, 20 days left, 21, 22 right now. And I think the Democrats have tried every scheme that they can think of. They were saying, well, we'll get the electors not to vote for Donald Trump. That didn't happen this year. We'll make January 6th so that Donald Trump doesn't get certified. Well, I think that's also been shown to be a big joke. An article published in The Hill over the weekend saying the 14th Amendment prohibited Donald Trump from being president, and that could be brought up on the January 6th certification process when the Senate and the House get together and certify the Electoral College vote. Well, finally, I think that by the way, that argument was rejected 9-0 by the Supreme Court when they were trying to keep Donald Trump off the ballot. Everything that's been done to Donald Trump has failed. All these indictments failed. Now we've got Jack Smith. His entire unit now should be indicted and prosecuted. They're going to go bankrupt, and they're worried about going bankrupt. They're not going to be hired by Washington law firms. These guys are going to be put out to sea, and what's going to happen to them is their lives are going to be ruined, just like they tried to ruin my life, saying I was going to go to prison the rest of my life. They put me in. This was under the Mueller investigation because they thought they had the final tie they needed, the Mueller prosecutors, to do Russian collusion. And they said, if you don't tell us who your source was with Julian Assange, we're going to bring you before a jury in Washington, D.C. They'll hate you and you'll be put to prison the rest of your life. Or you take this little plea deal here and say that you were just hiding the information because you didn't want to hurt Donald Trump, and we'll go lenient on you. Well, I didn't have a tie to Assange. I figured out myself that Assange had Podesta's emails. I told the Department of Justice to shove it. I was not going to take their plea deal. And they did not indict me. They were the liars. They're just trying to create enough fear where I would have pled. I told them that I was not going to take their plea deal because I could not imagine standing before God and a judge and swearing to a lie that I had a tie with Julian Assange that I didn't have just to keep myself out of prison. I prefer to go to prison rather than lie before a judge under oath, or to God. More importantly, to God. And if I had taken that plea deal, the Department of Justice Mueller would have had the last piece of evidence tying Donald Trump to Assange that they needed to do the Russian collusion. Instead, they ended the investigation in disgrace. Mueller appeared before Congress and showed himself to be a drunk old man suffering from advanced alcoholism as he drunk his brains out every day, living in luxury hotels in Washington, D.C., while Weissman ran the Russian collusion hoax, which has enormous number of crimes to it. Christopher, you'll put up the book Coup d'etat. It's a book I wrote on this, and this book I think is going to become one that we're going to comb through. I'll be working with the Justice Department to identify all the crimes that the Justice Department committed in this Russian collusion hoax. All right, I want to switch to a few elements. Chris, when you can find the coup d'etat, just put up the cover of it. We'll show it to everybody. I think that book is going to become much more discussed over the next few months. Janet Yellen is saying, let's do a few current stories. Janet Yellen is now saying that if we don't get an extension of the debt limit, the United States will not be able to meet its obligations. We'll have to default on our debt. Okay, now the problem with everything that we're dealing with economically is that we're at a desperate point. We are at a point where we have spent our national debt is now $36 trillion. Okay, now that's outrageous. And it means we're paying we're paying just outrageous amounts of money on the debt service. Now, the debt service is so out of control that let me just do a couple of articles here on Zero Hedge is covering this, I think, extremely well, picking up an article from the Epoch Times. But what the case is that Yellen is saying that we're going to hit the debt ceiling about mid-January. And the situation in the United States, I think, you get down into the story, Congress established a debt limit of $45 billion in 1939. It's raised it 103 times. As of October 2024, our publicly held debt was 98% of GDP, gross domestic product. That's the red alarm point, when the debt of the nation exceeds its gross domestic product. Okay, so the Congressional Budget Office has seen a sharp increase in our debt since October 2001. Our national debt's increased 32%. Okay, and the Congressional Budget Office projects that public debt will rise to 122% of gross domestic product in 2034. Okay, this is unsustainable. Okay, you've got our debt payments right now, the interest payments, especially with the high interest rates we've gone through. Well, the Biden administration has tried to contain this inflation that's been devastating the middle class. The interest payments on our debt have nearly tripled since 2020. In 2024, we're higher than spending on Medicare and national defense. The nonprofit the committee responsible for a federal budget, nonprofit organization, estimated that interest payments will continue climbing over the next decade and beyond, exceeding Social Security spending by 2051. Become the top expense in our budget. And that's if we don't increase the national debt more. And we're doing it at a very, very fast rate. The rate at which we're going from 36 trillion to 37 trillion is speeded up because the Democrats are out of control. They have no fiscal responsibility. And in fact, the Pentagon, at least $1 trillion they can't account for. I don't know how many billions can't be accounted for on the green initiatives under the Biden administration, or the money we've just been shoveling over to Ukraine. The financial situation in the United States is dire. And I think we're going to find that we're going to have to be looking at cryptocurrency solutions much harder than we've ever looked at them, as ways to get some wealth in the hands of middle America. But again, I think we're going through so many revolutions, so many fundamental changes, this rejection of woke, and I hope the fundamental rejection of woke is a pivotal point in history. I've also been working very closely with Archbishop Vigano, and we've been made some suggestions for different people to be appointed into the Trump administration. I'm going to continue to work on these names of people who need to be, who have knowledge of the CIA involvement in the coup d'etat that got rid of Pope Benedict and put in Pope Francis Bergoglio, who is a Marxist, in order to take the church into this LGBTQ plus direction. And Pope Francis in 2024 excommunicated Archbishop Vigano. Archbishop Vigano has published a book which I have published through Post Hill Press in both English and Italian. The book is right here. It's called J'accuse, and it's Archbishop Vigano's statement of why the Pope is committing heresy. It's a short book, but it's very important. And Archbishop Vigano, I think, is one of the strongest voices in the world proclaiming the need to get back to traditional values, to put God back at the center of our society. A couple of other stories I think are really of interest here that we need to cover, and that is let me just do the Ukraine story, which also caught my attention. Oh, by the way, Jimmy Carter died yesterday, and he was a worthless president. Now he's going to be deified as, such a great populist. Jimmy Carter had hostages taken by the American embassy in Iran when 1979 Ayatollah Khomeini returned to Tehran and produced this radical Islamic revolution. And Carter thought Ayatollah Khomeini was his best friend. By the way, Carter's the one who gave away the Panama Canal. Okay, and so now we're going to have to go through glorifying Carter. It was one of the, except for Biden, Carter ranks up there with our least effective presidents. And by the way, Biden, this homeless epidemic is finally getting some coverage that has exploded under Biden-Harris. Okay, so according to the Department of Housing and Urban Affairs, homelessness across the United States has surged to record highs during the Biden-Harris administration, attributed to the ongoing housing affordability crisis, which under Obama started to say that we don't need to have single-family homes in the United States. We're getting into condominiums. So the HUD has said that homelessness is up 18% in 1 year, with California at number one. Okay, HUD found 770,000 people were homeless on a single night in January 2024, 18% jump over 2023 figures. Soon we're going to have millions of people homeless. Okay, so we're sending money over to Ukraine. Okay, and at the same time, poverty, homelessness, mental illness, and drug abuse are all increasing dramatically in the United States. The rise in families experiencing homelessness is frightening. Okay, migration had a particularly notable effect on homeless families, which rose 39% from 2023 to 2024, HUD wrote in its report recently issued. This is disgraceful. And in a nation which should be abundant and should be able to produce abundance for the world, we're going into a direction of destruction. Thank you, woke. We've got to be worried about, using the right pronouns so we don't offend some schizophrenic nutcase that thinks that they are, an animal gender living a reincarnated life from 3,000 years ago. And we're supposed to take this seriously. Okay, so the world is in a situation where we are expanding the war. This war in Syria is now, again, we've had a radical group take over in Syria, and they're saying there's not going to be elections for 4 years. And this does eliminate the vehicle from which Iran can pass weapons into Lebanon for Hezbollah. That's a positive. But again, Syria is now destabilized further. And you see ISIS and the Taliban on the rise. We abandoned all this military equipment in Afghanistan under Biden. And I don't think the Middle East is going to be manageable by more wars. We're going to have to end the war in Israel as well, because Israel has now been restrained and not responding militarily to Iran. All it would take is one attack on Iran, and we could go to World War III. Okay, if Israel and the United States decide to attack Iran, we're again in a situation where it's all out chaos, and it'll be World War III in an instant. We're on the verge of World War III. Kamala Harris been president, World War III was assured, I believe. Okay, now in summing up, and I want to kind of begin the summing up for the end of the year, and Chris, I'm going to ask you to comment here as we wrap up. What I'm seeing is that we are being left by the Democrats after Obama. And I think Obama will also, in historic history, be recognized as a disgraced president. I think we're facing a situation unlike we've ever really faced, where the country is in economic chaos, where these satanic policies of the left now are exposed and more need to be exposed. But we're dealing with a situation in which we've got to get back on track. Got to get back on track supporting a middle class. Got to get back on track putting God and families at the forefront of our thinking, raising children, instead of these demons, Obama and Biden, with their diversity and their support of homosexuality. Obama, the first homosexual president. And, thank God we didn't have to deal with Michelle. And all these issues of who these people are, the pedophilia that dominates Silicon Valley and Hollywood. I published a book that, I'm an acquiring editor with Post Hill Press, and I'm in the process of finding books and acquiring books that meet an agenda of exposing this Satanism, which has dominated America. Greg Lund's book has not gotten the attention it needs. Silicon Satan. It's a novel. It's an extremely difficult read, but it's truthful. It tells you the satanic practices that go on in Silicon Valley, including murdering and eating babies. I mean, this is the sexual rituals which involve killing people. I mean, it's drug orgies. I mean, if you don't give in to Satanism, you're not going to make it in Silicon Valley or Hollywood. We come to that point. And out Satanism is it's just another religion. No, it's not just another religion. It's anti-religion, anti-Christ. There's Silicon Satan. And I would like in 2025 for people to catch on to this satanic nature of what we've been dealing with, the spiritual war we're fighting. But we have a reprieve with Donald Trump's presidency. And I think as he comes in with the nominees he's coming in with, the intention to clean house, we have a reprieve from this insanity which has descended on the nation, starting with Jimmy Carter and his embrace of Ayatollah Khomeini. The Democratic Party has now gone full, I think, treason, trying to subvert elections in conjunction with our intelligence agencies. I mean, this mess has gotten to be so severe. We were on the edge of World War III. We're on the edge of globalism, ending national sovereignty. We're on the edge of losing our country. And we're still there. But we have a reprieve to try to get things back in order. Chris, any final comments before we part? We've only got today, and tomorrow we will do a broadcast as well. And the next broadcast we will do then will be 2025. Chris?
Yes, 2025. In a few weeks, the keys will be handed to the adults as far as the executive branch is concerned, and that's going to be a lot better, as you've been saying, this particular program, and of course in the past. But you've been watching what the deep state's been doing. You're talking about the raising of the debt ceiling. You're talking about bankrupting certain initiatives. But Biden trying to sell parts of the wall off. Luckily, that was partially stopped. And you have Governor Hochul here in New York trying to shell out taxpayer money right and left. Yeah, I know she wants to give out these stimulus checks, but who's paying for them? And you have the driver's tax, the congestion pricing tax they're trying to push through. Oh yeah, $9 right now, $15 in 6 years, and of course the MTA is still trying to push that gridlock, the extra money for the gridlock days. Hochul says she's not going to allow that to happen, but who believes her anyway? Really?
Well, the subways in New York are not safe.
Oh yeah, that's right. Did you see the photo op she did last week with the telling everybody, look how safe these subways are around the same time that, or probably was same day or around the same day that this young woman was lit on fire by an illegal immigrant who shouldn't have been here, who should have been in jail at the very least.
The Democrats want to let the criminals run the country.
Exactly.
And let drugs in the country, let illegal aliens in the country without vetting. I mean, this is insanity. And meanwhile, destroy God. You know, Pentagon said they wouldn't let Christmas be said in the CIA. No celebration of Christmas. Don't say Merry Christmas. You'll be fired.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't believe in God, Jesus Christ. We don't believe in that anymore. It's all nonsense, all fiction. Thank you, Harari. Harari is the fiction.
Yes.
You know, Harari is the one who is saying that human constructs are merely thought games, and so therefore we don't have rights, you know, because we can't find rights like the bones and the tissue and the blood inside a body. Well, Harari, you know, but Harari wants his rights to publish this trash.
Even he said the globalists took a major hit after Trump's election, which was funny to see.
Yeah, well, this worm belongs in the trash heap of history.
Yes. Along with the rest of them. John Kerry can go. Just go back and go into retirement. The globalist days are pretty much going to be over. Have you been watching the UK? The Labor Party, just like the Biden administration, is destroying the country to the point where Farage's party is now
I
gaining
see that
so much steam. That's right.
Farage is gaining again.
He's playing the long game, and that's going to work out hopefully for the people. But Labor Party is what, another 4.5 years just to destroy the country?
Well, they can hold an election any time. I mean, the point is with the vote of no confidence. I
Right.
mean, the whole issue globally is that we have had this mass delusion of the new world order. Thank you, George H.W. Bush.
Mm.
We're going to have imagine this new world, John Lennon. Imagine if there were no God. Imagine if there were no nations. Then there wouldn't be any wars. Well, imagine there were no John Lennon. And that destructive nature to undermine the fundamental things that make us human and civil, that allow a society to exist. Instead, you get these two jerks.
Mhm. Yep, 1988, I believe it was, or shortly even afterwards. These two were yammering on about how there will be a new world order. Both of them.
Yeah, well, the New World Order, George H.W. Bush, I saw him towards the end of his life, was in a wheelchair and was, again, suffering major illnesses or dementia, whatever he was suffering. And he had the same thing now going on with Biden. These people are dementia bound. I've got the light finally hitting me at the end of
That's
this.
right. The mysterious dark Corsi. There we go.
Here we go. The dark horse goes up again. All I can say is the end God always wins. God's going to win here too. As we end 2024, let's be thankful that we have a reprieve, that Donald Trump is going to be president. We spared 2 assassination attempts. The hand of God is on the United States of America again, I believe. I think it's because enough of us have come to 2 Chronicles 7:14, in which we have, you see the light returning, but that get rid of the dark, talking about Harari and New World Order and the Bushes and John Kerry and all the rest. Now we have the possibility here, if we can get on our knees and ask God to forgive us for letting the country get to this point, God will hear our prayer and heal our land. Let's make that our theme for 2025. Dr. Jerome Corsi, thank you for joining us. Today is Monday, December 30th, 2024. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless.